This week on MS Refresh, all that is new, all that is great, all that is underwhelming in the world of Microsoft Teams for June 2022, plus Microsoft claiming major improvements to Teams performance, all that and more. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hi there, and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 62 for the work week of June 13th, 2022, and our first episode dedicated to Microsoft Teams news. Coming to you live from the West Coast, my name is Sean Bugler.
And from the East Coast, my name is Matt Wade.
Matt Wade, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you for asking. A question for you. So many people don't know, but you are the engine that makes this show go. And I am just a pretty face. When you wrote the stinger, when you wrote the stinger on the outset here, Microsoft claiming major improvements to Teams performance. Obviously, we're going to talk about that after the news. But I want to ask you a question, purely philosophical. Can you claim it's a major improvement if it was so bad that any improvement is a major improvement? Isn't that kind of like price gouging? Like, you know, the FTC saying it's illegal for you to raise the prices just so you can advertise them as discounted. Well, do you think this was all part of the plan?
I was just going to say it's the JCPenney sale model, right? That's essentially what that is, right? Of course, now I'm going to get sued for libel, but it's okay. I like JCPenney. So.
It's okay as long as it's opinion, as I learned in my business law and ethics class for managers. Nice. Well, as long as it's a matter of opinion, it sounds like
I have retained you as my legal attorney.
My hourly rate is very low.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if I would be publicly claiming these wins. Some of the numbers are a couple are kind of high, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. I just think that my takeaway from it is that, you know, everybody's just waiting for Teams 2.0 and this ain't it. So what's the point of bragging until you get there?
Well, I've got a lot more questions that I'm going to pepper you with as we get further into it here. But before we go any further, Matt, there's some really big news we should talk about. Do you want to go ahead and throw us out?
Yeah. So next week we are going to be having Derek Cash Peterson on the show to talk about the Microsoft Learning Pathways. So he'll be our guest interview for this month, which we are looking very much forward to. And
yeah,
I think that's what you're talking about.
While. It is.
Yeah, unless you had something else you wanted to talk about.
No, the mind meld is working. Good. That's going to be exciting. Yeah, we've been planning this for a couple of weeks. I've been looking forward to it. As I've learned over the last, 2 guests that we've had, hopefully many more to come. That there's so much more out there that we don't know. And so it's really nice to bring these subject matter experts that are putting the good stuff out there, bringing them home to roost.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about it. So I got to tell you, I'm going to geek out real quick here. I think I now can check the box before I die. I saw the Google Maps Street View car in the wild today in my little town. Yeah, never seen one in real life. Again, easy killer. You live in Silicon Valley, and I live in the Nowhereville, just outside of Albany, New York. So like,
I almost get murdered by a driverless car every time I step outside my apartment.
Well, I just assume that Street View hasn't been updated since the one time Google wanted to show off that they had mapped most of the U.S. Because why would you ever come back here?
It's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, anyway. So I thought that was my my highlight of the day and very big news in my life. I did not. I was actually at a. I think it was just like it was yellow light turning red, so like I had to be on point. But I was pulling out of a development, and it was like and it was like late 60s, early 70s-year-old man, I think. And I don't know if it's like that's like an Uber part-time job kind of thing, or these are like dedicated people. Role. Is it? Yeah.
Typically, anyways. Like
of course, that.
Maybe that's changed, but when they first did it, and likewise for all their international expansion, it's a contractor role. Contractors power most of these big companies, Microsoft included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. That's fair. Anything notable on your side? I mean, you had kind of an exciting couple weeks in the recent past, so I don't know if you can really top that.
No, I'm so excited to tell you that absolutely nothing exciting has happened. I continue to unpack my apartment. My wife and I are trying to figure out what sharing an office is supposed to work like. So we've got some like sound deadening stuff coming in so that we can separate the desks accordingly, because I am a bombastic personality, but you know, I didn't marry my polar opposite, so putting us in the same room is challenging.
Cacophony is what you're looking for. Got it.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out the best path forward on that one, and also just interesting challenges that I'm tempted to solve with technology, like figuring out, you know, what our schedule is. You know, I put it out on Twitter a couple weeks ago. If there was couples out there that, you know, followed me on Twitter that were experiencing similar challenges, sharing a space and how they solved for it. And there were lots of really interesting things about where to arrange the desks and what kind of, you know, soundproofing things to use. And also don't.
Sure.
You know, so I'm continuing to try and figure out the best path forward on a bunch of those different things. The big one top of mind right now is just figuring out what schedule availability is like, so that we don't both schedule like high intensity meetings at the exact same time. So I don't know if that's going to be like room booking software that I'm going to put outside the office door or something.
Tell me you're gonna like set up your Calendly so that she has to book you, or, you know, something in that area.
Oh, I wouldn't dare to be the one.
I
would not be the one to make her book. I would definitely be the one to, if there's any sort of additional work required, I will be the one.
You.
Yeah, to put that on. The hope is we can find mutually beneficial solutions, but to be decided.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or to be seen, rather.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we just kick into it and jump into the news?
Let's do it.
This is the news.
It's all Teams this week. Kicking things off, let's tackle everything new to Teams meetings this month. Starting with video effects that will let you adjust the brightness of your video feed or set a soft focus, which you can manage from your device settings either as you're joining a meeting or during the meeting. For those of you who watched Apple's WWDC, you might have seen similar functionality for those that choose to use their iPhone as a webcam starting in September. Also coming this month for Teams meetings, meeting presenters can enter Together mode for all participants, which is a change from before, where views of Together mode have always been a personal preference, something that you've been able to see, but maybe others in the meeting have not been able to unless they opted in. The co-organizer role is finally rolling out in full. I'm pretty sure I've said those words before, but for real this time, the co-organizer role is finally rolling out in full. Live captions and live transcripts in meetings joined via the browser are on the way. Collaborative annotation on shared content, kind of that, if you've seen the redesigned whiteboard experience where you can see everybody's cursors bouncing around, that same experience, but on shared content in live Teams meetings, allowing you to, again, write and mark up a shared screen or window. If you use a virtual desktop interface, lots of updates for you, including multi-window chat and meeting support in Azure VDI, Windows 365, remember that, and VMware. The ability to give and take control of screen share in Citrix VDI, background blur in Azure VDI, and Windows 365. If you're in the government cloud, some updates for you as well. Listen up. Presenter mode has arrived in GCC and GCC High, so you can place your video on top of shared content. Anonymous join across clouds lets higher cloud users, so that's GCC High, DoD, join meetings in lower cloud directly from the desktop app. So for, again, those of you in GCC High or DoD, that's going to be a breath of fresh air. The ability to mirror your video for your personal view is now available as well for GCC High and DoD, as is music mode for GCC High. The ability to manage meeting options in GCC GCC DoD, and 2x2 gallery view in Safari in GCC High and DoD for those very specific 30 NASA geeks you see when a Mars rover lands that could use Mac OS. And for those of you unlucky enough to be both in a virtual environment and on a government cloud, there are many of you. Live transcripts are now available in GCC High and GCC High. GCC and GCC High on Azure VD and Citrix VDI. I am going to puke alphabet soup. And that's just for meetings. Here's what's new this month in Teams for the collaboration experience. Starting with the ability to do something I have done my whole life, chat with yourself. This is really useful for those of you that like to leave notes maybe you're in a live Teams meeting and you want to leave a note. You don't have anything open except the Teams meeting. You can open up a chat with yourself, leave that note. Teams chats can also be embedded in Dynamics 365, pissing off every person who's ever asked for a Teams chat web part in SharePoint since 2017. After years of waiting and multiple false starts, the dynamic connection between a channel name and corresponding SharePoint folder is finally coming. You might remember they released this and then pulled it back. If you change a standard channel's name, the SharePoint folder will change to match. And if you change a private channel's name, the corresponding SharePoint site's name will also update. Now, this is only moving forward. Changes that occurred to channels in the past will not be affected. A new automatically included tag called @TeamsOwners will be available to use in all Teams channels to send a notification to specifically the owners of the team, whoever they happen to be, without having to @mention each individually or set up a separate tag that you then have to manually maintain. New suggested reply languages are also here, which brings the total to 20 languages. The feature is enabled by default, but you can turn it off if you'd like. When setting up approval templates, you can also require comments during the approval process for added detail on the review that took place. Continuing on with Teams collaboration updates, the ability to export your approvals app data to a CSV file so you can get a data-centric look on all your approvals activity, as well as to have long-term record retention on that if you'd like. If you're in a government cloud, some updates for you specifically, sensitivity labels in Teams templates in GCC are here. Bots are also here specifically for GCC High. I know you've been waiting for it. The ability to set for by default how Office files open from Teams, the options being in Teams, the browser, or the desktop app. These are all now updates that GovClouds have available to them now, which is very exciting. And that is all the Teams news fit to read.
That was the news.
Nice work.
Thank you very much. That is quite a bit.
Yeah, that was probably half of the items that were actually on the list too. It's kind of hard to go through and pick what's important. If you have a big interest in Teams rooms, there were some items on there too that I just don't think the population out there that uses those is really kind of worth identifying at this point yet. But yeah, Teams definitely gets the brunt of the update status stuff within the roadmap these days.
I will say one thing that jumped out to me that I think is really exciting specifically for, and this is one of the big benefits of us carving out Teams as its own dedicated spaces, that we can highlight some of the more government-centric ones because of our, of course, our friends in GCC, GCC High, and DoD. They always kind of get the short end of the stick with respect to when updates come out and also when they're communicated in community spaces like this. The ability to set the default for how Teams opens up Office files, that's huge. And that's been a huge complaint for all people that didn't have access to it. And of course, the commercial cloud got that, a year ago?
Yeah, probably.
And so that's really, really nice because I know that for me personally, when my organization was exploring Teams, and one of the big reasons we didn't go forward with it when we initially explored it was staff didn't like this idea that when they were opening up a file, they were boxed into, at least by default, the Teams window pane, like that you had the ability to open up one file at a time. And the only way around that was to go into the Teams browser experience, was to open up the file, go through the process of it opening up in the Teams desktop app, and then spinning it out into the Office file or the Office app. It's really nice to be able to say, when I open the file, just open it in the Word app that I know does the thing, or the Excel app that I know does the thing. That way I can have Teams be that, the center of where work happens, but allow these applications that exist for a reason, at least for now, to do what they do best.
Anecdotally, I am pleasantly surprised that actually works, because that feature has been in SharePoint libraries for many, many years now, pretty much ever since Office Online Services came out as part of SharePoint 2013, I think, maybe. Right. And that force open in the desktop app feature or option within the advanced settings for document library almost never worked. And that was something that people were really displeased about. Like, oh, I should be able to get this to work, and it just didn't turn on. It wouldn't work for most of the time, and I could never figure out why. I will say, though, I've gotten the same kind of pushback from people that I've worked with before in teams. And the thing that I kind of point out is, yeah, being able to default open in the desktop versions of the Office apps is nice. But really, you should be taking full advantage of the OneDrive sync, because then you can open up the other file types that have to open up in their desktop apps, most notably PDFs opening up in Acrobat, right? Which you don't get from Teams. You can't force Teams to open up a PDF file into Acrobat or Bluebeam or whatever other PDF viewer you happen to use. And if you just use Sync, you get around all of it. You would never have to wait for Teams to support that. So I actually generally point people to that and say, like, yeah, you can complain about not having the ability to open up the desktop app from Teams, but like, who cares, right? These are basically just file shares.
Who cares?
Use this better feature and be even happier with life than just sitting there stewing about something that actually doesn't give you a whole lot in life, but this thing does.
But then you're robbed of the experience of context, Matt.
Yeah, well, context is overrated.
I'm pretty sure that's the saying, right? Context is overrated.
Yeah, that's definitely the hashtag of my life. So put that on my gravestone.
Now, of course, Matt, of course, that my organization doesn't really leverage Teams all that heavily. So it makes sense that at least for this episode, and of course, I'll try to pay more attention as this episode becomes more and more frequent in my life. It made sense for you to take the wheel and tell us something that is happening in the world of Teams that you think is interesting to our viewership.
Yes. So Microsoft posted an article or a blog post, and it kind of got picked up by a number of the, I don't know, do we have like news organizations within the Microsoft sphere?
100%.
Caught it.
Yeah,
Patrick caught it, but it wasn't like something like The Verge. I don't think The Verge caught it or something like that. But like, the other news people within the M365 sphere. I'll pull up the numbers here. The big kind of takeaway, and the link to this original blog post is already in the show notes, so feel free to scroll down and take a look if you want to. But Mark Longton on the Teams had posted an update where they states that they delivered enhancements to Teams that improve its overall interaction responsiveness time and creates a more fluid experience for the user, so they say. And that included transitioning from Angular framework to React, upgrading Electron, and reducing re-rendering within the app, the desktop app. And their kind of claim here is to gauge the progress. They looked at anonymized data for the 95th percentile for all desktop users in the world, meaning that 95% of the time, the experience is better than the metric that they find. So what you see, these numbers that are showing right now, most people have a better experience than that. They say looking at the 95th percentile, or they do look at the 95th percentile because it includes users on low-end devices, users on low bandwidth networks, and incorporates other edge cases that can impact the user experience. So in this graphic, you're going to see a number of double-digit improvements here, most notably the Compose message box opening more than 60% faster than it did before, which makes me wonder what the heck was slowing it down so much. I will say, we kind of alluded to this earlier, the comments asked about the new WebView 2 version of Teams are basically that next generation that's been promised as a complete rewrite of the app to move away from Electron. And to Mark's credit, he did acknowledge the question and responded to it, but he pointed out that they have a ton of resources on that new, next-gen Teams, but said that there was no information that they can publicly share at this point about timing. So you'll see some of these numbers are, kind of interesting. Switching channels is 25% faster. That's somewhat notable. I'm surprised that muting and unmuting audio in a meeting was so slow that they could actually improve by 16%. I'm sure we're talking milliseconds here, so 16 milliseconds is potentially notable can be caught by a human if it was taking, 100 milliseconds to actually take the response. Totally making up numbers here. But yeah, so I think this is one of those things where, is it an improvement? Presumably, right? They wouldn't be telling us these numbers if it wasn't. But it also just kind of one of those things where they're telling us about incremental changes that probably overall don't get noticed very easily in an empirical state, and we're all just still waiting for the Teams 2.0 version that's going to be off of Electron, off of that web wrapper essentially, and being an actual native app to each of the operating systems that they support. So,
wouldn't WebView 2 also be a wrapper? It would just be their wrapper.
Yeah, I guess so. That's totally fair. But the point is that they build it for the experience that they need it for, not built off of
a little bit more vertically integrated.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that makes sense. You know, I was thinking about it as you were reading out that specific call out about the upcoming supposedly kind of teams too. When they originally announced it, they undersold what that was supposed to be. You know, they were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be using a new engine. It's going to open up the door to new possibilities here." But it's interesting that as time has gone on, they've started to build up this WebView 2 version of Teams that is not this version that we're talking about, but is the version to come, has become this bigger and bigger mountain. And it leads me to believe that this that we're seeing here, this announcement, is supposed to kind of buy us a little bit more time. And because if I'm not mistaken, when they announced that at Ignite last year, like this was the fall Ignite announcement about Teams that this was coming. We were supposed to see it for consumers by summer, I want to say.
I think that's right, because it was going to be a Windows 11 add-on that the consumers are going to get first, because I think they are trying to prioritize personal teams to really start pushing the competition with iMessage and FaceTime. No offense to the Android platform, or the Google platform, but I think those are the two real things that they're really trying to push against. Because if you look at, Windows 11 itself has Teams built in, but it's not, the work and school version of Teams, right? It's a separate one. So they clearly have already done some work on it to make that available as a separate app. And eventually I believe they're supposed to be making a universal experience where you can log in with whatever account you happen to have.
And that was feasibly going to open the door up to, and again, this is not the version that they're talking about in the blog post, but the version to come, that would be the one that potentially opens the door to multi-tenant simultaneous login, the ability to, account switching. So it's, yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know. I don't even remember seeing that, but that would be a nice foundation change, or that would be a nice strategic plan to implement and give additional reason to do a change like this. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I do remember them, because that was like the immediate question, which is, hey, account switching. And they essentially pointed to the WebView to revamp and said, not that it would come immediately with it, but that the current architecture did not truly allow for account switching in a way that switching to this new kind of bedrock might facilitate. So it's interesting to see. I'm really looking forward to seeing it, because look, like my organization is a Slack/Zoom operation, and it's because we kind of hold ourselves up when we say, from our perspective, what's the smoothest user experience, what, gives us the best of all worlds and things to that effect. And, I continue to believe that those platforms do a really good job of that. Now, of course, they do things in a different way, and we can have a difference of opinion about whether that's the path forward or not. But rising tides raise all boats. And so I hope that this update improves things, because of course I, am occasionally on a Teams meeting or two. I have to deal with people who use Teams.
I have to deal with, he says.
I wish I could articulate the vitriol, the venom that comes across our IT team's desk when they have to deal with a Teams meeting, because it's not a supported platform within our organization right now. I hope that it is better, because it makes everybody's platform better. It makes everybody's experience better. I don't want Teams to be the one that gets poo-pooed. And so I'm looking forward to seeing those experiences, because you mentioned the mute and unmute. I noticed how long it takes to mute and unmute.
Really? I noticed. So I've never noticed that myself. Okay.
Oh yeah. It's we were just on a call with a vendor partner of ours a couple weeks ago, and the person on the other end, we were on a Teams meeting. Every time they would go to unmute themselves, you would catch what they were saying like halfway through the word, because they would click and then start talking, because you expect you clicked and then it's So I think that this is great. It's interesting that they're bragging about these speed improvements, and I hope that they are as noticeable as the numbers and all this caveat about the upper 95th percentile of statistics. I hope that it feels faster.
All I can think of with the 95 percentile thing was, did you ever have to take an Iowa test back in the day?
An Iowa test?
Like it was one of those. State? It was a standardized testing thing.
Oh no, I was in military school. We had the Terra Nova.
Okay. So I don't know how Iowa became the source of these standardized tests, but it was called the Iowa test. Awesome branding. I don't know if it was something that was across the whole country, but it was definitely within the Northeast. So I don't know how Iowa worked its way into the Northeast, but the scores never came back with an actual score. It was always being compared to the other people that took the test at that time. So your scores were the percentile. So you could be in the 33rd percentile, which meant that you were only better than 33% of other people. But that still could have come back as like, it was like the ultimate curve. Like it could have come back as you had, successfully, you would have gotten a B- maybe. I don't know. Like, right.
Right. Not you objectively got this score. You're smarter than 75% of these idiots.
Oh, yes, exactly. Of the other people in your cohort this year. And that could just mean that it was a bad test, right? Like, it's all based on this. Anyway, point being is I haven't heard the 95th percentile or the 90th percent. Like I haven't heard those numbers in a long time since those standardized tests in public school back in the day.
Well, this leads to an interesting question of if we could compare the speeds for these basic functionalities across platforms and create the ultimate comparative analysis between Zoom, Teams, WebEx, FaceTime. How long does it take to mute and unmute?
Which I feel like should not be a thing. Like nobody should ever have to worry about that. But
here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. But
well,
so yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you highlighting that. And I think that there were some really interesting things in the news here. Now, of course, you and I are still adjusting to this new format. But next week, as you mentioned, we've got a really special guest. Remind us who we're speaking to one more time.
Yes, looking very much forward to it. We're going to be talking to Derek Cash-Peterson, Microsoft MVP. He is a member of the Simpraxis team, along with like Julie Turner, Mark Anderson, Emily Mancini, that team. And he is currently co-lead, either way, integrated with the Microsoft Learning Pathways solution, which is a very cool SharePoint template that basically connects you directly to the Microsoft learning resources. So you don't have to recreate the wheel and that kind of thing, which I am all for, because now Microsoft puts it out there. We might as well just use it. And it's way better than it was, years ago. So he's going to talk through, what it's like to lead or to work on that project and how that solution works, because it's the kind of thing that once you learn about it during that session, you see how it kind of goes through how it works. The next day, you can do the exact same thing in your organization, push that out there. And, I'm not going to say all your training needs are met forever because you'll still want some local stuff and maybe point to specific things in that service to say like, highlight things, or this may not be appropriate, but you are able to customize it. So you can, if you don't have Yammer, for example, you can choose to not bring the Yammer content over. So you're not confusing your users, but it's a super, super cool solution, and really excited to have him here. I think he'll be calling in direct from Iceland. That's where he and his partner and family live.
Nice. Yeah. And I've used that within my organization when we were first rolling out like the modern experience of SharePoint, and we really wanted to focus on, SharePoint experiences, being able to customize that. And I run not lately, but I do a conference talk every couple months that is, how to build your office through Microsoft 365 training program from the ground up. And that's a huge component of that, is
Definitely.
Just being able to create a destination for that content. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it's evolved over the last 2 years that, since I really put hands on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
And then the last week of this month, so that's next week, tune in, subscribe, hit the bell so you know what's happening. The final week of this month, we'll be talking about the Power Platform Showcase, which is the time of the month where we will talk about something interesting that's happening in the world of the Power Platform. So much like we focused on what's new in Teams this week, last week we had the roadmap recap. If you didn't watch that, you should go check that out so you can see all the cool stuff that's happening across the Microsoft 365 spectrum. We will be showcasing the interesting things that are happening in the world of the Power Platform. Specifically, we'll be talking about the newly announced 5th pillar of the Power Platform, Power Pages, which is I'm super excited about.
I thought your phrasing there was going to be something interesting to Sean Bugler, finally. I thought that's what you're going to say.
I mean, all of the above.
Oh, yeah.
I try not to punch down. But I'm looking forward to it. So again, for those of you who are joining us live, we appreciate you. For those of you who didn't catch the show live, that's okay too. But know that we plan these sessions out a couple of days in advance. We schedule them so that you can jump in and you can ask questions in the comments in advance. If there's something you would like to hear about, if there's something that you saw on Twitter or in the news or wherever that you would like us to tackle, we always take questions at the tail end of the show. So please don't hesitate. Take advantage of that.
Definitely. I agree. Cool beans. All right, well, I think that just about does it. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. As always, a like and a subscribe is much appreciated. Definitely leave a comment below. We will respond to comments during the course of the week. And Sean, thanks so much for joining me this week, and can't wait to hang out with you and Derek and everybody else again next week. So take care.
Thanks, man.